Hey everybody, this is Liz LePage. I am really excited to be bringing this video to you guys because it is all about my editing process. So this video is going to encapsulate a start to finish look at how I take an image from raw all the way to a finished product for a client. Now, this is going to include not just ON1 software. I'm actually going to expand and use Photoshop a little bit too, because it's an essential part of my workflow. And that's one of the things that I want to emphasize. I use multiple different platforms for processing. And so you guys are going to be able to see a lot more of a realistic look into how I actually edit my images. So this isn't going to be some snippet about how to add a cool effect inside of ON1 Effects or how I do my retouching. This is a combination of everything. So we're going to be working on the center image in this screen right here, and I'm going to show you how I took it to this point. And it required a lot of selective editing, some specialty retouching, and a couple of other tips that I'm going to show you guys today. We're starting out today inside of ON1 Browse, and we're going to be searching for a photo that I actually want to edit. Now, if you're like me, you probably know exactly which photos you want to edit when you get home. Whenever I go on a photo shoot and I get to do something a little bit different, so most of the time I'm shooting weddings and headshots. And so this was really exciting. I got to shoot with a model. We got to find a really cool location. I had a lot of fun. You'll notice I was playing around with like light leaks and stuff like that. So when I came home and I uploaded these, I was really excited because I knew that there were a couple of images that I really wanted to edit. So this was one of them. We were playing around with the light that was coming through her hair, and I was so excited about the color of this image. So this was one of the few that I was really stoked about editing. But the one that we're going to be working on today is this one here. And it was shot in a very similar situation as the image that you just saw. And this is what it's going to end up looking like. Now, a lot of people would probably look at an image like this and think that it would be too much work. I am definitely an editor at heart, so I love processing. It's kind of one of my favorite parts of photography. I mean, I like being out in the field, don't get me wrong, but I love coming home and spending 45 minutes making an image go from this to this. I just think that's awesome. So let's go ahead and start out. We're going to start in develop, and we're going to make some small adjustments to this. And I almost always start in develop. It's pretty fast and pretty easy, and I play around mostly with my exposure, contrast, highlights, shadows, whites, blacks, sliders. This is kind of where I focus inside of develop because I want a better base before I start retouching, which is what we're going to do next. So we're going to save some of the highlights. They're a little blown out, so I'm not going to save that many of them, but I'll try and up the shadows because a lot of the bottom part of this image is in shadow. And then I'm going to go down and I'm going to play around with the color a little bit. I want to warm it up quite a bit, not too much, because we are going to edit color in just a moment, but it was generally pretty cold, and I like to start with a warmer canvas. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to increase the vibrance just a little bit. I really want to be able to see where my color is coming from. Sometimes I add a little bit of magenta when I add some warmth so that it's more of an orange and less of a yellow. So it's a little trick that I like to use. Now, inside of Develop, you have this option to show more, and I almost always use this option called Color Adjustment. And this is very similar to what you're going to find in the color enhancer inside of effects. And I use this on pretty much every single one of my images. I love to edit color. I think it's the biggest part of how you create an incredible image, is paying attention to the color comparisons and how they interact inside your photo. The biggest one for me is always I would say it's the warmer tones to about green. These can really get funky if you don't pay attention, especially if you increase the warmth in an image like this. Obviously, this is going too far, but all of the greens start to become this very weird chartreuse green, and I absolutely hate that. So being able to edit the greens separately makes a really big difference. I'm going to increase the coolness of them so that I can still get those kind of true green colors. And one of the things that's really helpful here is you can also lighten and darken. So I'm going to lighten some of these a little bit so that they start to pop a bit more. Okay. I like to always jump over to the oranges and the reds. These are great for retouching, especially if you have someone who has reddish skin. you can actually, if you increase the saturation, you can see where this color is affecting your image. This is mostly just that light that's hitting her hair, which is really great, but we can play around with the intensity of that here. And then let's go ahead and take a look at the reds. So the reds are mostly in her hair, and I'm going to leave that alone. I might lighten it just a smidge, but there we go. That's a little bit better. Okay, so I have a much better base. You can take a look. This was our original, and this is edited inside of Develop. Now I need to do the tough part, which is probably the least fun part. That's going to be the retouching. So I'm going to go ahead and jump into layers, and I'm going to do some really, really quick, fast retouching. I'm not going to go as into detail as I normally do, because I want to be able to jump into effects and show you guys the final processing of this, which is kind of the exciting part. So when I do retouching, I always go into layers and I duplicate my background layer, and then I relabel this. So we're going to call it retouching. And then on the left-hand side, I use a mixture of all of these tools. So I'm just going to list them out really fast so you guys know. We've got our perfect eraser, content aware. We've got the retouch brush, which is going to be great for softening. And then the clone stamp tool, which is great for exact and very precise edits. So let's zoom in a little bit and take a look at this and see what we want to do here. Now, I'm not at all saying that she has bad skin, especially because you can't see that much of it, but there's a couple of tiny little blemishes that I want to get rid of. And a lot of times when it's small stuff, I use the retouch brush because it's quite a bit faster. It doesn't need the content aware fill technology. I'm just clicking and dragging over a lot of these spots right here. Now, if you want to get rid of something like under eye circles, lower the opacity down. So we're going to go ahead and drop it to about 22. And I'm just going to soften her under eyes here on both sides. She was kind of in shadow, and so sometimes what can happen is you just end up in a situation where their eyes look a lot darker than they actually are. So we're just kind of softening a little bit of the skin here. Not too much. There's not really that much to do. Now, the last thing here is her dress is a little messy. And that's just because she was sitting down in the car before we did our photo shoot. And I, of course, decided that I wanted to put her in a silk satin dress, which did not end very well. We're going to retouch this also in effects. I'm going to be lightening this a ton because it's really, really dark and I need this to be white, white, white. But a good way to get rid of some of these wrinkles is actually by using that lower opacity retouch brush. If you want to be very, very specific about it, I highly recommend that you use the clone stamp tool. And that's actually what I did for the original image, but I want to go through this kind of quickly for you guys so you're not watching me retouch forever. The one thing that I will mention is that I spend a lot of time retouching. So I am very, very specific about how I retouch, and I think it's a huge part of how we edit, and it definitely shows off how much time you spend on an image. And so most of the time I'm going to be retouching for about 20 to 30 minutes. And again, that's why I'm just showing you the techniques and I'm not actually going to do all of them so that you guys aren't bored out of your mind. But I'm going to speed through the next couple moments so you guys don't have to watch me do this, and then I will meet you in effects and I will talk to you all about my selective editing. So you may have noticed that my retouching is done. So I went ahead and I cleaned up her dress quite a bit. I got rid of all of the folds there. She still has some naturally up above, but I'm going to brighten this a lot. If you remember in that my final image, this was really, really bright. So I evened out as much as I could, but I don't want any detail there because I want it to just be solid white. And her face didn't require a lot of retouching, so it didn't take me too long to do this, but we'll skip all of that because this really is the most important part. This is where I do all of my color editing, all of my specialty processing. How I make this pop is here inside of effects. Now, I have a collection of presets that I use all the time, and I'm using these presets because I wanted to talk you guys through how I actually create these and how I edit using them. A lot of people think that presets are just a one-use kind of a deal, and I am a firm believer that you should always use presets and edit them as you go. A lot of people just add it and they're like, well, I don't like it, and then that's it. And I am so not that kind of person. I believe that you should spend some time processing. So I have a whole bunch of presets here, and you'll see that a lot of them have some kind of like light flare effects, and we're going to add that in a little bit. I'm going to show you how I did that kind of cool light spot right there. But first, we need to actually choose a preset. I have a couple that I really like. I'm going to start out using this Film Preset Special Edit, and we're going to go ahead and click on that. And I want kind of a film look for this, but it's a little heavy-handed. And so that is where selective editing comes in and being able to edit these presets. So most of the time what I do is I go through each one of these layers and I actually see what they do to my image. So we've got a whole bunch here, and I'm just going to turn them off, and we're going to start all the way down at the bottom. So our color enhancer, adding some warmth here, pretty good. I'm going to go down and play around with my colors even more. I still think that those greens are not green enough for me, so I'm going to push them over to the right, and I'm going to lighten them up even more. So I didn't lighten as much as I wanted to inside of Develop, and that's why I like combining these two together, is because I can just do both, which is really cool. All right, bleach bypass creates a special type of contrast that's very unique, and one of the things that happens when you decrease shadows and you play around with your highlights and your shadows, you lose a lot of contrast. And bleach bypass brings that back without oversaturating your image, which is really difficult to do. So we'll go ahead and do that. I lightened it a little bit, and I actually don't know if I like it that light. So I'm going to keep that down at 0. And then it also desaturated just a smidge there, which is fine. All right, let's jump up to our antique filter. The key to using the antique filter is the blending options. You'll notice when I open that up, I switched my mode from normal to color, and that keeps my image, especially in the tonal sense, intact, while just applying these really awesome color adjustments. And I love the antique filter because you can do that. So I use this one called Stockholm to create a lot of my film style looks, because it's just this like perfect, almost teal blue that's really, really hard to replicate. All right, so we've got that on there. I can play around with the intensity of that. I'm going to leave it at about 20-25. Let's take a look at our next color enhancer. There's not much going on here. So the thing that you can learn is that sometimes there will be filters. When I turn this on and off, there's not much of a difference. I'm just going to get rid of it. It's not really doing anything for this particular image. Maybe it would for another photo, but for this one, I don't want to bother with it. So let's go ahead and hit the tone enhancer. The tone enhancer, the secret to a lot of the tone enhancer is down in the curves. And when I open this up, you'll notice that I have a whole bunch of edits here on all of my different color curves. And that is how I create, again, a lot of these film style looks. So when you see a tone enhancer in a preset, always check the curves, because that might be changing it a little bit. Now, I actually like this image more than this adjustment that I made with my tone enhancer. And so I'm actually going to reset this, because I don't think it's working for my photo. And this is what I mean by editing presets, you guys, is, man, can it make a huge difference. So we've got a pretty good base here. I don't need to lighten it anymore. I don't necessarily want to add contrast. So this tone enhancer is not doing it for me either. We're going to go ahead and delete that. The last thing on here is a photo filter. And this is applying this kind of warmish orangey color. And check in the blending options, you'll notice that it is applying it to flesh colors, which means anything that is in the first part of the rainbow. That's how I think of it. It's the reds, oranges, and slight yellows. That's mostly what makes up flesh tones. And so I like to do this because a lot of times, especially in a scene like this, it'll apply it to the highlights, the kind of warm highlights, and it'll apply it to the skin, which is really great. Now, I'm going to go ahead and leave this alone. It's a little heavy-handed for me, and so I'm going to back it off just a smidge, and that's looking a little bit better. Now, we have a pretty good preset situation going on. Now comes the local adjustments, and this is just my favorite part, is being able to selectively edit something and make certain parts of an image pop. It's just the coolest part. So we're going to start by playing around. We need to edit her. She is in shadow and she is not looking very good right now. So I'm going to increase the exposure on my local adjustment layer here, and I'm going to do it quite a bit so that I can see where I am painting. And I'm going to go up to my tool options bar and I'm going to pump my opacity up to 100. And let's go ahead and just start painting on. Now, I am very loosely doing this, and I want to make sure I mention that because there are going to be people who are like, why aren't you using the perfect brush? And I don't always use the perfect brush, and I don't always make an exact mask, especially for a situation like this. I'm going to be adding some lightness and some contrast and some detail, and I don't need to spend the time being exact here, and that's totally fine. So there are going to be times where it does not warrant the need of the perfect brush, and that's pretty normal for me. All right, so we're going to lighten her up a little bit. I'm going to add some contrast. So one of the things that's happening here is she's losing a lot of contrast. So we'll increase that and then add some detail to her. She is just like, she is flat. And so we're going to go, yeah, that's looking a lot better. Now, one of the other things is the color of her is a little bit off. And so I'm going to play around with the color until I come up with something that I like. She's a little, we don't want to go too overboard, but she's just getting really cool. Obviously, we're not going to go the full way, but that is a lot better. Okay, and then the last thing I'm going to do is increase the highlights and the shadows. So we're going to increase the highlights here and then darken the shadows just a smidge. Look at the difference. Oh, I love selective adjustments. Okay, we're going to add another one. This is going to be my burning and dodging layer. This is where I'm going to very carefully lighten and darken. So I'm just going to increase my exposure a lot. I mean, like really go overboard. And a lot of times I increase my highlights too. And then instead of just painting this on full blast, I drop my opacity down to about 15 or so. And then I very carefully paint on lightness where I want to highlight her face. And this means that instead of just lightening the entire part of my model, which would not look very good, I'm going in and I'm enhancing the features of hers that I want to stand out. So she's got a couple of odd shadows here. And so I'm just cleaning those up a little bit with this low opacity brush. The other thing that this is going to be great for is getting rid of some of these weird shadows that are happening on her dress. And I really want her dress to stand out a little bit more. And so one of the things that can be really helpful is playing around with the shadow saver slider. So we're going to go ahead and just lighten all of this area down here. If I were not zooming through this, I would probably use my perfect brush, but I don't want to spend a ton of time doing this because I want to show you guys a couple more things that I like to do. But that is looking a lot better, like a lot better. Oh yeah. So her dress is starting to look a little bit more normal. She's starting to look a little bit brighter. This is all working out. Okay, we're going to add another layer and we're going to turn this into the darken layer and we're going to darken a couple of her features. I like to darken the eyebrows. That's one of my favorite spots. It just adds some contrast to the face and I think that that can be really helpful. This is a great time to go in and maybe darken like, I love to darken that cheekbone area right there. I'm going to darken her hair a little bit. It's a little flat, and even with that detail slider, it doesn't look quite right. And it's going to shape her face a little bit more. And that's what I'm going for, is I want her face to stand out here. Oh yeah, so that's already looking a ton better. So with all of these adjustments, we've made a huge change to her as a whole. I mean, look at that. That's crazy. So much better. Okay, so the next thing that we need to do is edit the background. And one of the best parts of using masks is that you can reuse them consistently. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this mask of her, and we're going to create another adjustment layer and paste it and invert it. So now we can make edits to just the background really quick, and I want her to stand out even more than she is right now. So we're darkening it. I'm increasing the contrast. Now, the highlights and the shadows, you can play around with this. This is going to be totally up to you. For this image, I don't want to increase the shadows too much because, again, I'm having her stand out a little bit more. And then I'm not going to add a lot of detail, just a little bit to make some of the edges crisp up a bit. The other thing that's really cool is if I wanted to cool this down or warm it up, I can do all of that now. So we're going to cool it just a little bit. Maybe intensify the greens even more to make them pop. And then I'm going to increase the vibrance a little bit more. Okay, so we've got our preset, we've got our specialized local adjustments. This is where we started, and this is where we ended up. I have one last really cool thing that I want to show you guys. It's one of my favorite little extras that I like to do in an image like this. This is very specific to the type of editing that I like to do, so some of you guys might not like it as much, but I think this is a super cool trick, and I'm hoping you guys are going to like it. This is how I'm going to show you how I create kind of a light blast. It's a light leak, but not really, and it's not really a lens flare, which is why I'm not using the lens flare here. I want to create a brightness up above her to really intensify the bright light that was coming through the trees, which I feel like got a little bit lost. And the best way to do that is inside of layers, and it's using a color fill layer. It's something that I feel like a lot of people just don't do, and it's so useful. It's so cool. We're going to select our fill color. I actually have an orange already selected. This is what we're going to use. You can choose whichever color that you want. Everybody is going to be a little bit different depending on what they want. My recommendation is that you want it to be very bright. So this was a little dark for me. And remember, this is going to be, it's going to be a big bright light at the top of the image. So it needs to be really bright. Okay, so we got our color, and we're going to leave our blending mode at normal. I'm going to increase the opacity, and we're going to play around with the blending mode in a minute, but I like to leave it on normal so that I can show you guys where we're going to create the actual mask. You can do this a couple of different ways. I almost always start off with a masking bug, and then I switch over to a circular or round gradient. And we're going to click inside the image. We're going to shrink this down quite a bit. One of the keys here is it's actually going to be kind of on the edge of the image. So half of this is going to be up above, and then really increase the feather. We want this feather to be big. So we want it to be crazy, crazy soft here. And that is looking awesome. So we've got a really good placement for this, and that's an awesome start. Now we need to play around with the blending. And we are just going to scroll through until we find what we're looking for. I like screen if you want to create kind of this light blast like I'm doing. There are a couple different ones that I enjoy using. Overlay and soft light don't create the brightness that I want. So when we turn this on and off, it's lightening, but not quite as much as I would want. So a lot of times soft light and overlay are a little too light. And then the other one that I sometimes have used in the past is color, but you'll notice that because it's leaving the tones alone, again, it's not creating that light blast. And so we're actually going to stick with screen and then just adjust the layer opacity. So we're going to drop that down quite a bit. One of the things that you can do with these fill layers is if you don't like it or you want to intensify it more, you can duplicate it. And then if you want to edit the mask, just pick up your brush tool. And let's say that we want to make sure that she is completely untouched here. I'm just going to very roughly paint her out. You can use a perfect brush here if you want to be more exact. I'm doing this pretty quick, but I want to make sure that she is 100% in focus here, and if she has any of that light blast, it's going to be really distracting. Okay, I think maybe I'm going to switch over to that soft light. I actually really like that. I think it looked kind of cool. So let's go ahead and take a look at our complete before and after. We're going to save this and jump back into browse, and let me show you guys the difference between where we started and where we ended up. So I know that this was a little while ago, but this is our original photo. This is without develop adjustments, without retouching, without layers changes, without effects. So a lot of people would look at this image and think that it's too dark. They wouldn't like these light enhancements that are happening on her, which I think enhances it. They would be scared of the shadows and the highlights. There's a lot of stuff that if you looked at this image flat, you probably wouldn't think it has potential. And with a little bit of specialty editing and some cool effects, you can end up with an image like this. And this photo actually ended up in my portfolio, and it's on one of the front pages of my website. I love this photo, and it just requires a little bit of extra love and affection and spending a little bit of extra time making sure that your photo really pops. If you are interested in learning a little bit more about me or following what I do, you can find me at elizabethlepage.com. I am extremely active on Instagram. I talk about everything from my editing techniques to my day job. And I also have a Facebook page. I don't update it as much as I should. And so if you really want to know what's going on with me, you'll want to jump over to my website because I have a blog and I'm just opening up a store and there's lots of really fun stuff going on there. So thank you guys again so much for watching. And I cannot wait to see what you guys do with your images.